Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Good morning. What's going on? What the hell's going on with my microphone, everybody? I figured out, actually about 30 seconds before we actually broke onto the air that the microphone was still on. Not that the sound was actually streaming at that point. I'm not entirely sure about that. But hey, it's no problem. I didn't do anything untoward. And then I announced, oh, hey, look at that. My microphone is still on. And then I turned it off for the intro music so everything would come out nice and smooth. And then it wouldn't turn back on again. And I think it's giving me a warning sign. Time, perhaps, to replace the microphone before the whole thing gives out. I think that was the warning sign I got from the last one of these things. And I've said so in the past. And you see how well I'm doing with follow-up. Okay, so reminder to self. Get yourself a microphone. Maybe what we'll do is we'll take tomorrow off so that if the microphone dies tomorrow, we're covered. And then if the microphone survives just fine Monday through Thursday next week, we'll do the same thing for New Year's Day. All right. The holiday is coming up, the big day. Are we allowed to say it? Is it like the Super Bowl where you're not allowed? Oh, well, I just broke that rule anyway. But is it like the Super Bowl where you're not allowed to just say that? Why don't we do that? Or has Trump made it safe to say, he likes to say he made it safe to say Merry Christmas again, but not certain whether he made it safe to simply say that it was Christmas, Merry or otherwise. So I'll have to check the books on that one. Well, here we are. Time for yet another show. Let's see. Oh, and Bill says you heard us yawn before the music started, and now everyone on Twitter is talking about it. At least these guys are. That's true. Okay. It's a sleepy day. What can I tell you? Did you hear me apologize and say, hey, look at that. I forgot that the microphone is on. All right. Well, the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now, and I'm awake, even though I was yawning. And it's a good thing it wasn't one of those days where I said, screw this whole thing. I'm never doing another show if it's the last thing I ever do, except it would be. But all right. Anyway. Live for another show. Kagro X, me, the yawning guy, David Waldman, wonders if Trump is forgiving all those people because it's the first time in his life he's ever been able to legitimately use the words par and Don in the same sentence because he's a cheater at golf. You understand? Okay. Well done. I like the play there. Okay. Yeah. Well, we have another round of pardons to talk about here. Okay. This is unfortunate. And said, oh, look, and here's some news from Matthew Rigdon, who says, I'm actually up early enough on the West Coast. How unfortunate is that? To hear you live, and you're usually playing the podcast, and he gets through it at 1.5 speed. So this is weird. You're not used to hearing you at regular speed instead of 1.5 speed. Does Trump have enough days left to sign pardons for all of his LLCs? Is his question. We'll answer that at 1.5 speed. Yes, sure, no problem. Okay. How's that? Does that work? Don't try playing that one at 1.5 speed. I guess that doubles it. All right. Yeah, it's another round of corrupt pardons. We could talk a little bit more about what limitations there might actually be or courts might actually find on the pardons. But, yeah, it's a long haul to even get there. Not entirely certain any court is going to want to entertain it. But the new round of pardons, okay. Yeah, all right. Even Darwin says we heard all of this and it caused a ripple effect across the. How exciting for everyone tuning in. Not even sure, maybe we would be taking Christmas Eve off, so they check in and find out that this is what goes on before the show. I say, and where's my phone and things like that. All the most exciting news. Anyway, lots of pardons. This time he got closer to the core group of people who could otherwise perhaps send him to jail post-presidency. Roger Stone, who had already had his sentence commuted, also got a pardon. Paul Manafort got a pardon. Who else? There's a whole list, and it was horrible. George Papadopoulos is in this. Was he in this round or is he in yesterday's round? I can't even remember. Actually, he was in yesterday's round. Haven't gotten to the family members yet. That might be something he's actually planning on doing on Christmas. I think he actually, if I could make an attempt at getting inside Donald Trump's head for just a second, he clearly, he certainly has no respect for the the gravity of the office and of the function that the power that the Constitution gives him to grant these pardons, so that he's not taking it seriously. He doesn't care if people say these are being granted for corrupt purposes. They're his purposes, and that's all that matters to him. I think that, one, he may intend to pardon people even closer to them, but two, that he may intend to actually not only just issue them on Christmas to try to take advantage of the spirit of, forgiveness and mercy and goodwill and whatnot that's supposed to go along with the holiday. I think he actually considers this to be the ultimate Christmas gift. Only, not just because and not actually at all because there's mercy involved. He doesn't believe in the concept. I think he thinks only one person in the entire world can give this particular Christmas gift. And it's me, because I'm the most powerful person in the whole wide world. And I'm going to give these as Christmas gifts to my immediate family. And I could see him actually trying to gift wrap something like that. All right, we have the same problem going on today that we had the other day with Skype not registering on the one computer on which it's most necessary. So I will have to call Greg. I really need to check this. I had worked out a system for making sure that this worked at some point a few days ago, and or not actually a couple of weeks ago. And I think I lapsed in it because once I got it to be part of the routine, it was never a problem. As many times as I actually tested it, it just never failed. And so, all right, well, now it fails when necessary. Somebody's trying to tell me something here. Let's give Greg a call. Oh, no, now it's working. Look at that. All right, well, let's answer. All right, I was getting all set to give you a call, and I think just poking the machine and saying, all right, if you're not going to work, I'll make you work. Woke it up.
You put a quarter in the back. That always makes it work.
Yeah, there ought to be something like that.
And then you kick it. Those are the two things that you have to do.
This machine won't even let me put a.
I apologize.
A DVD.
I should be speaking 1.5 times as fast, right? But I'm from New York. I can do that. So what happens is you really need to do this by putting a quarter in the back and then kicking the machine. That'll do it.
Okay. Yeah. The trend is to put less holes and slots in these machines as the more advanced they get, and eventually it's just going to be one blob of silicon, and you glower at it, and it somehow knows what to do.
Right, with a pile in the corner there of DVDs and CDs that will last forever and they'll never deteriorate.
And I can't put it in there. You're just going to have to look at them and read them. I'm sorry, you're silicon. Right. Do something.
So normally this is a show about policy and procedure, but I guess we have to add pardon and pandemic to it. So
all right.
We also have COVID relief and shutdown and veto and all sorts of stuff. And you were going over the pardons, which are obviously corrupt and ridiculous, but everybody expected them. Trump is trying to clean up his dirty laundry before he leaves, so nobody has a real good look.
You can't indict
it won't work, but it'll delay things. And his whole thing is delay. Then I die in, so you didn't catch me. Ha ha.
Yeah.
We
could skip right to that.
You've brought this up often, and I think it's worth bringing up again. Speaking of policy and procedure, this pardon stuff. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if it's legal or not. Everybody tells me that it's almost unlimited in terms of what he could do, but it's impeachable. And so, he ought to be impeached over this and then barred from running again.
Yes.
And the really interesting part about that is, what do his rivals for 2024 do with that kind of vote?
Vote for it. I mean, that's what I keep telling him to do. Look, you want to clear the field for 2024? Do it. Get rid of him and make sure he can't run. I mean, I will say, if I'm him, or if I'm guessing what's going to happen, and they were to do that and to bar him from federal office, and so therefore he can't run, he will file his candidacy nonetheless and simply say, well, who says I can't run? What are you going to do? What's the law? What's the procedure for getting me to not run and get millions of people to not vote for me and then demand that I be installed in office? There is a process that can keep him off the ballot, but I have a feeling he'll try and force people to do that.
Good. From jail.
I'm cool with that.
The guy isn't going to have unlimited resources when he's out of office because he can't use your taxpayer money, so it doesn't work quite the same way.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I don't know what Putin's going to do with his billions, but he might just say, screw this guy. I'm sitting on a pile of money. What do I need Donald Trump for?
Right. So let's bring people up to date in terms of the chaos that's been going on for the past couple of days.
Yes.
Even from yesterday, there's even more. Mm-hmm. So this is Jake Sherman tweeting from Politico and the Capitol, where he says, "Good morning from the Capitol, where we're about to have a pro forma session in both chambers during which nothing will get done." Okay, pro forma sessions. That means that it's not closed. They're actually in session because somebody showed up and said, "I'm here." How does that work?
Well, yeah, like that. I mean, the reason it's going on is so. Well, actually, they hold these pro forma sessions so that Trump doesn't say, "Oh, you're adjourned," and try to do recess appointments. But
right. So it's a way of not adjourning, but they're not really doing anything.
Right. So that's what's happening today. Yesterday they
weren't
even
there. How long do they last?
there.
Is it like 2 minutes? Is it like all day?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, this one might last longer because they might end up having to do some business. But ordinarily, yeah, literally about a minute. They gavel in. They say, "Here we are," seeing no one looking for recognition.
There we go.
In recess. Yeah. Sometimes some housekeeping stuff is done if bills needed to be were introduced the day before, and they read them the titles or whatever, and then they leave.
So Jake Sherman's headline for his political playbook is "Cyclone of Uncertainty and Chaos." Remember, this is the chaos president, which we've been telling you since before day one. With 27 days left in his presidency, that's really the only saving grace. And the nation on the doorstep of Christmas. And I would add to your commentary about the Christmas presents is the ultimate Christmas present is Trump to pardon himself, because the only Christmas presents he appreciates are those that are actually him.
Good point.
So it's not really a good Christmas present to pardon anybody else except maybe Ivanka, because he thinks he is Ivanka. I mean, they're like one unit. They're a dyad.
Yikes. Kind of weird.
With 27 days left in the presidency and the nation on the doorstep of Christmas, Donald John Trump has sucked Americans into a violent cyclone of uncertainty and chaos. He's pardoning criminals at a breakneck clip. Last night it was Manafort, who's in prison on tax charges, Roger Stone, Charles Kushner, Ivanka's father-in-law. Earlier this week, crooked politicians and other unseemly actors, Ben Sass called the pardons rotten to the core. That's why impeachment, I say. Maggie in the New York Times, and New York Times Mike put it this way: Trump said perhaps his most unleashed. In other words, he's exactly who we always said he was, and you guys refused to write about it.
Dang.
Trump is perhaps his most unleashed. What are you talking about? It's the same person he's been for like 20 years.
Yeah.
30 years. Trump,
consistent.
as he has so many times before, thank you, Jake Sherman, has thrown the government he's supposed to be leading into an intractable crisis. We spoke to a few people in touch with the president, and they say this: he's come to think this fight he has pitched, teasing a veto on a COVID funding that his administration negotiated, is playing well with Americans.
Well,
he is so isolated.
Nice to play well with
he is so crazed. He is so inside his own head. There's psychiatric terms for that, but, I'm not a psychiatrist. We love psychiatrists. I just happen not to be one. Trump believes he's highlighting what he considers to be wasteful foreign spending. Never mind, he proposed it.
Oh, yeah.
And is pushing for $2,000 checks in place of the $600 checks his underlings and party agreed to. Now, the moment he said $2,000 checks because he wanted to be a populist and come in and save the country, Nancy Pelosi immediately agreed, which put the entire Republican Party in chaos, because they were gloating over how much they had run rings around during negotiations, which they hadn't, but that's what they like to tell themselves.
Right.
But here's what won't play well with the base. The social safety net our country is supposed to provide is about to be ripped away in the middle of the holiday. On Saturday, pandemic unemployment assistance used by gig workers runs out. On December 31st, pandemic emergency unemployment compensation, which lengthened unemployment insurance, runs out, as does the eviction moratorium and the medical expense deduction. All gone unexpectedly unless the president signs a $2 trillion package. By the way, in that package is also some relief for surprise medical bills, which is really good. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in there. We talked about the earned income tax credit yesterday. Of all the legislative battles Trump has pitched, this is the most dangerous and befuddling. Here's what's on deck. There's the uncertainty about whether he'll sign it. If Trump doesn't sign it, how will they avoid a government shutdown Monday night? Will he sign anything? Now, Nancy Pelosi will force a Monday full House up or down vote on $2,000 checks. That's necessary, as we talked about yesterday, because she'll ask for unanimous consent and she won't get it. Either Mo Brooks or Madison Cawthorn will object. Will Republicans vote for it? Because we know Senate Majority Leader McConnell and Senate Republicans are likely to ignore it.
Yes.
If you're in the Senate, your basic job is to ignore the House if you possibly can, I guess. Will Congress be able to override Trump's NDAA vote? That's the Defense Authorization Act.
The veto, yes. Will they?
Veto. In his final interview in 1973, Johnson told Cronkite that antagonizing Congress is never a good idea because it's like a pilot having a co-pilot filing in different directions. But Trump has taken it a step further. So. He's pressed the ejection seat on his co-pilot.
That's a funny image.
He's publicly turned on McConnell and John Thune, the top two Republicans in the Senate, and the only ally he has left is Kevin McCarthy, who sent a letter to House Republicans criticizing a deal he was a party to and voted for.
Yes.
Because, there's no end to hypocrisy if you're a Republican. It just doesn't exist. You have no shame. You'll do anything. Mm-hmm. That's great. That's great. That's great. What? You signed that? That's terrible. I've been against this all along.
Right.
They are.
I helped you pass it, but now I'm shocked to find out what I did yesterday.
McConnell in the Senate has practically no political incentive to pacify Trump at this point. And if worse comes to worst, he'll have a better hand in a few weeks with Biden, because at least Biden's word is good. So pretty much all the president's allies recognize this is mostly a fit about Trump's frustration with lawmakers who've been publicly acknowledging he lost, to paraphrase.
Okay.
And Trump's remaining Hill allies are convincing Trump he has a chance of overturning the electoral results. See, Trump thinks that taking everybody's unemployment away is great. People love him for it, and they're really eager to have the January 6th electoral results overturned.
Yes. They probably won't realize that it's gone until then.
Nobody's around to tell them this is really stupid and people are going to hate you.
They're afraid to do it. Yeah. This is an incredible situation, not the least of which is, again, like you mentioned here, all these people having to tie themselves in knots to pacify Trump, who isn't eventually going to jettison them as well. This is his criticism. As soon as I saw the video that he released criticizing the legislation that included the COVID relief as being, loaded up with all of these other unrelated items, I realized, actually, I'm surprised we didn't see it coming, and that they walked into this trap. Being at the end of the year, they kind of had to expedite things and combine the bills, but it's one of those things, as soon as I saw it, we should have known that he was going to pretend that this was a COVID relief bill being larded up with trillions of dollars of excess spending, as opposed to it's the government spending bill. It's the yearly budget with some COVID relief thrown in. It was actually almost clever. And I know he didn't think of it himself because he read the speech verbatim and didn't ad lib. That's how I know he didn't know what he was talking about. But he was just told that this would be a good political play. And he did it. He executed it. It worked.
Yeah. So that leaves us pretty much stuck.
Oh.
And in a bad spot. So here's a piece from the New York Times. Trump's attack on coronavirus relief divides GOP and threatens recovery. And again, a lot of this is going to play out as so many things do right now in Georgia, because we have the prospect of Loeffler and Perdue saying, and Perdue's already running commercials saying, I got you this relief. I got you $600 check.
Meanwhile, Trump is running commercials too.
Right now, they're sort of like, what did Ron Ziegler used to say? That's non-operative.
No longer.
That commercial's non-operative. No longer operative.
By the way, if you have your links, I think Skype ate them. So as you mentioned the stories, pass them along again so I can follow along. I'm sorry, my machine is not up to speed here today.
I haven't really posted anything except Jake Sherman's link.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case,
do it as we go along. So here's the New York Times.
Please eat my previous
with Trump's attack on coronavirus release. In the campaign trail in Georgia to Capitol Hill, President Trump's demand for changes upended political and economic calculations. Now, let me give you an idea of how things are going in the specials. We have a special election runoff. And a runoff.
Yes.
Right. The special election runoff is Loeffler and Warner.
Right.
And the polling is close. So all you need to know about it is that it's close. You don't have to worry about polling being right or wrong. It's close.
All right.
The Real Clear Politics average, and these are the only people doing it these days that I could find easily, have basically a tie. The last two polls have Warnock up by 7. We talked about that yesterday, and Warnock up by 2. But the previous ones have Loeffler up. And what's interesting about them is a tweet that Eric Erickson had yesterday. I'm speaking to Republican pollsters, in effect, he said, and they're increasingly confident that we're going to do fine. Okay. In other words, Trafalgar Group has Loeffler up by 6. Survey USA has Warnock up by 7. So somebody is wrong there. Right? Remington Research has Loeffler up by 1. Fox 5 Insider Advantage has Warnock up by 2. So the polling is all over the place. The averages are very close, and it's probably going to be close. You can't tell much from increased turnout. It's not clear from detailed analysis of the individual counties that Republican turnout is up to where it needs to be, but that has nothing to do with who wins, because the big show on Election Day is really what's going to change things. On the other side, we have, instead of Loeffler up by an average of 0.2 points, that's pretty close, we have Purdue up by 1 point. And that's because, again, the Republican pollsters, Insider Advantage has Purdue up by 1, Remington Research has Purdue up by 4, Trafalgar has Purdue up by 2, but Survey USA has Ossoff up by 5 and gaining. So, you can't use the polls to tell you anything except it's close. It's just interesting that Republican and Democratic pollsters, or Republican and neutral pollsters, are really looking at this electorate in completely different ways. And one of the things we don't know, and one of the things that's going to make it hard to really know what's going on, is that some of the people who were voting in the specials did not vote necessarily in the general election. They could have become of age, or they moved in, or, in other words, you have a whole bunch of reasons to declare fraud. The thing is, if Loeffler and Purdue win, it's very hard to make a case that there was fraud in Georgia.
Yes.
So it's actually to Trump's advantage if they lose. But how does he get him to lose without it looking like he did it? That's where he'd hire Michael Cohen, but Cohen's not on speaking terms with him these days.
Right. Hey, would be if he pardoned him, maybe.
Yeah, well, he's not going to pardon him.
Yeah, no, he won't. He has no plans to. But I have a feeling Michael Cohen might be that easy to win back if you needed him. But you don't. So, okay.
Right, so you have that. This Time story about Trump giving clemency to more allies, including Manafort, Stone, and Charles Kushner, is just one of many, many that you could have picked to summarize what's going on with the pardons. But again, it's all about covering his trail so that when he leaves, there's less and less there to try and discover. So, basically, Trump is a dirty, rotten, no-good scoundrel, and so it's pretty obvious. And, I don't think the Democrats have done a good enough job linking Republicans to Trump. They've dumped on Trump. He's lost. That part was effective. But, it was part of Biden's strategy to try to not really tick off the moderate Republicans that he's going to wind up needing to work with in the new Congress. And interestingly enough, that doesn't stop him from going down and campaigning on behalf of Ossoff and Warnock, saying that he needs them. Whereas the dumping on the Republicans is going to be done by Republicans and Trump. So there's no reason for Biden to do it. Trump's doing it for him.
I guess so. And all right, well, should be limiting his exposure to COVID-19 anyway.
Well, in theory. Now, that 4-minute video on Tuesday night, the Times covers in their story, demanding significant changes to the bill,
that one, 4-minute
is complicating the Georgia election. The Democratic rivals in Georgia appeared to turn a liability into a political advantage 13 days before the election, agreeing with the president's demand for $2,000 direct payment checks.
Okay.
In other words, they were pitting, it's your tax money being wasted versus no, we need help, because Democrats are always trying to save people, and for some reason the Times considers that a political liability. But now that Trump has declared that he wants to help people, all of a sudden it's a political asset. So go figure, it's the New York Times. But anyway, Pelosi and top Democrats prepared to move forward on Thursday with new legislation that would provide the $2,000 checks, daring Republicans to break with the president and block passage of the bill in the House. Of course they will. But then what? Now they've broken with the president. Does the president care? It's hard to know. He just wants people to pay attention to him. It's not like he's actually interested in policy. So, it's not necessarily a harm to Trump to have his desires rebuffed. All he wants is the publicity and people talking about him.
Yeah.
On the other hand, struggling Americans are going to have issues with this, as the Times points out very kindly. Noblesse oblige. But those struggling Americans that we've been talking about for weeks, don't always vote their interest, because if they did, they'd have a Democratic Congress and we wouldn't be in this situation. And again, we have to make that clear to people.
Okay. It's a job to do, huh?
Right. Mr. Trump on Wednesday, that was yesterday, also made good his promise to veto a major defense policy bill. And that's because he wants traders to remain the base names. And, it's hard to know how that's going to work out. It's probably going to be overridden and relatively soon. But then again, with these pro forma sessions, it's hard to know when Congress actually comes in and does stuff. When do they work?
Monday will be the day in this case. It's looking like
I thought they worked Tuesday, Wednesday,
and
Thursday.
Normally. At the end of the session, they work like mad, and then they want you to think that they scramble like this all the time. But, yeah, when there's only a few days left. Word is, according to David Dayen, who follows such things, as a matter of fact, the story of the morning, as he puts it, Democrats have released their standalone bill, which will increase the direct payments to $2,000. The House did, or maybe already has, or planned to anyway, block the unanimous consent request as expected. But Pelosi has announced that the Cash Act, as they're calling it, will get a recorded House vote on Monday, the same day that they come back to override the veto on the defense bill. So Trump has given them the excuse they needed to call everyone back and actually have a floor vote after the unanimous consent agreement falls. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I was staying nice and quiet there while the music played, unlike the beginning of the show. Okay, well, does everyone have it straight? Yes, the veto of the defense authorization bill, and whether or not he vetoes any of the rest of the things that are now pending, like the omnibus spending bill, hardly matters.
Which may be a pocket veto, a different thing altogether.
Oh, right, yeah, we'll have to, I guess we'll have to go over that as well. But the veto of the NDAA, which he had run out of time to not veto. If he didn't veto it or sign it, it would just become law automatically after the 10 days. But so he issued his veto. But that is the excuse that the House needed to summon everyone back to Washington, D.C. so that they could be on hand to have an actual floor vote on the $2,000 checks to try and capitalize on Trump's weird intervention there. If the unanimous consent request to pass it fails in the House due to somebody's objection, and according to David Dayen, the way he writes up his summary, that already happened this morning. But I spent a good part of yesterday morning on Twitter with people who insisted that this was all some sort of evil ploy by Nancy Pelosi, of all people, to actually claim credit for wanting to give $2,000 checks, but actually do everything she could to avoid taking any proactive action to make it happen, and that the setup of the unanimous consent request was just so that she could look like she wanted checks, but someone would object, and then she'd say, oh, gosh, that's all I could do. And I said, well, then you would just schedule a floor vote for the thing afterwards. I mean, it happens all the time. People object to unanimous consent requests. Oh, but will she? She's not really going to do that.
Yeah, she will. Why wouldn't she?
Well, like 10 seconds later, she did. And I don't know, but people weren't sure that... Yeah.
Unproductive way of thinking about how Pelosi works.
Yeah, I mean...
And also how Congress works. So we know that. But so Twitter's also asked some intriguing questions, which maybe you could help us with. Me not being a lawyer, I don't fully understand it. So Paul Manafort is pardoned.
He is.
And so let's say Congress subpoenas him. And let's pretend subpoenas matter.
All right, yeah.
Let's skip that part.
Well, this is easy. Okay.
So can Manafort be compelled to testify, writes Heretical Stoic, in court or in committees? And will he have any Fifth Amendment protections left? I think he does, because if there's future crimes not covered by this, then he's covered by those. Still subject to perjury if he lies? I would think so.
You would think.
And can he be compelled to produce evidence against himself for crimes in Ukraine? I don't know that he can, because it's still Fifth Amendment stuff.
Well, it depends on the nature of the pardon, and I don't think I've read the pardon, and I'm sure others have read it more closely. I'm sure Marcy Wheeler has probably read this thing backwards and forwards and has opinions on it. But yeah, this comes up in the context of these pardons all the time, because ordinarily, if you're pardoned for a crime and can't be punished for it, right, and then you're asked about it, where you previously might have been able to invoke your Fifth Amendment rights not to incriminate yourself by answering questions truthfully in sworn testimony. If you've been pardoned from serving any, for any punishment, any loss or deprivation for this crime, and then you're asked questions about it, and you invoke the Fifth Amendment because you're afraid you will incriminate yourself, they remind you at that point you've been pardoned of that incrimination. It can't happen. It's not a possibility. So you really need to answer the question and do so honestly. That's the usual interpretation of even non-corrupt pardons. So there is that. On the other hand, depending on the wording of the pardon, if you were to then say, all right, I'll give you testimony, and then lie in that testimony, if your pardon isn't pardoning your future perjury or all crimes arising from, all charges arising from whatever it is we're pardoning, then you can get yourself in trouble again that way. And of course, you could just say, I'm not going at all. And if they seek to charge you with contempt of Congress, who knows? Maybe according to if you're getting prospective pardons from the president, maybe you're pardoned from that too. So it depends on the wording and whether courts are going to accept this idea of preemptive pardons, and can a president issue somebody an actual get out of jail free forever card? No. But can he claim it and cause problems? Yes. So I don't know. We'll see. But there's a lot of talk about calling people back and demanding this testimony, which also a lot of analysis. I think was it maybe Brian Beutler noting that calling them back for testimony before Congress might run into Biden's, run up and butt heads with Biden's plans to sort of bring everyone together and not look backwards and not target political enemies, at least not from the get-go. But Congress isn't him, and
Biden
he's not
doesn't
Congress.
do it. It's the Department of Justice.
Right.
Biden's off the hook because he's not the one that's actually orchestrating this.
You're right. He
All
can
he has
rely
to do
on
is
that.
not tweet about it, and he's good.
Yeah, he said he
I
was
think he
going to
can do
let
that.
the
He doesn't
Justice
like to tweet.
Department do its work and not interfere. And if they chose to pursue these things, or Congress chose to pursue these investigations, he can say they're a bad idea, but he can't stop them, and that might be his plan. We'll see. But again, there's also the problem of them being subpoenaed and then saying, I don't know, I got away with all the crimes I wanted last time. I'm not going. So I don't know. Maybe you wait until Trump isn't available to refine or expand on those pardons to subpoena him.
Right. Speaking of pardons, I think it's absolutely worth mentioning, by the way, that amongst those pardons isn't just the crooks that helped enable Trump's election. It's Eric Prince's Blackwater people.
Yep.
were like disgustingly lowest of the low.
Yes, that was a real heartbreak.
That's it's certainly worth mentioning there. I sent you a link. This happens to be Talking Points memo. Republicans block a plan by Democrats for $2,000 checks despite Trump's demand. So you knew that was going to happen. We all knew that was going to happen.
Right.
And let's see if they actually name names here.
In terms of who objected?
Yeah, just always interested in that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Republican lawmakers, Democrats taking advantage. No, they're not really naming names.
Yeah, you have to be in the gallery and be able to see live who calls it. They don't make a note of it in the record. Sometimes you can see on C-SPAN if the person at the podium, says, I object. You can see it on camera. But otherwise, it's not something they keep track of. So, unless TPM was going to put somebody in the press gallery. And I don't think anybody's putting anybody in the press gallery these days. You're just not going to know. So, which is, to your advantage. You can just say it was any Republican, quite honestly. It was Kevin McCarthy. Okay?
Uh-huh.
All right. Can't prove it wasn't. How about that?
Yeah. So why not? Why not Dana Rohrabacher? Why not just bring somebody back who's like paid by Russia and just do it the right way?
Right, sure. As a matter of fact, right. It was Joe McCarthy.
And which segues into the other group of people that wound up being pardoned. The corrupt Congress people.
Yes, right. There were
Duncan
several.
Hunter, Chris, what's his name?
Collins, I think.
Collins, and Steve Stockman.
Yeah.
So basically what Trump is doing is he's pardoning war criminals, people who corruptly help him get elected, and corrupt Congress people because grifting is part of the deal. And in his world, grifting is like the highest calling you can possibly have,
right?
Higher than medicine or the priesthood.
In case you thought he was leaving out corrupt cops, no, he's also pardoning them. I have this just a quick tweet I'll add here. Somebody, Craig Whitlock, mentioning here that he's an investigative reporter for the Washington Post, saying this will get lost in the shuffle. But Trump also pardoned a former Maryland police officer who had a horrific and racially tinged, as newspaper people say, racially tinged. Pardon me. Well, that was a strong one. Racially tinged record of. Yeah. All right. Everybody's pardoned now. The record of ordering her police dog to attack unarmed black and Latino men.
Great.
And went was sentenced for it, convicted of releasing dogs on unarmed men back in the 90s. And Trump has dipped back in that well and said, well, I'm going to do a tip of the hat to the Blue Lives Matter crowd too, and pardon somebody duly convicted of their criminality in attacking racial minorities under color of law. So awesome. Just thought I'd bring that one up because Craig Whitlock is quite right. I'll get lost in the shuffle otherwise.
Right. The last thing we'll mention, we did mention on the show, there's more information now about the mutated coronavirus in Europe, probably present in the U.S. somewhere too.
Pardon it.
And it is worrisome, but it's a reminder that things besides vaccines, which is to say social distancing and masks, are still important. And here's one from Wired, which I found was pretty interesting, and I think is moving in the right direction here. I've seen this mentioned elsewhere. Here's a plan to stop the coronavirus mutating. Prioritize people who are immunocompromised for early vaccination. In other words, people who are immunocompromised often harbor the virus for longer periods of time, giving the virus a chance to muck about. So, trying to stop that early is just a concept which seems to be a good idea. Scientists who studied the immunocompromised woman from the Washington nursing home observed marked within-host genomic evolution of SARS-CoV-2 with continuous turnover of dominant viral variants. In other words, the virus was definitely evolving, including those with changes in the spike protein sequence during the course of her infection. So if you can make the infection shorter, then you'll have less chance of something like that happening. So the virus will evolve. There's no evidence at this time to suggest that it's going to change the vaccine results. Over time, it might. It's not a flu virus, which mutates rapidly. Flu viruses mutate from year to year. So this year's vaccine may not work the same way as last year's vaccine. But the advantage, of course, is with the new technologies that we have to develop vaccines, we can keep up with it. So from year to year, you get a new vaccine just like you get a new flu vaccine. So I'm not all that worried about it, even if it should happen.
Okay.
But there's no reason to think that it will. And these are things that can be done to help, mitigate that. Vaccinate the immunosuppressed, but also practice your things that you have to practice now anyway. So don't rely completely on the vaccine. And, of course, get vaccinated. That would be a good thing to do if you can. Too early for the general public. But there's a million people who've already been vaccinated, mostly healthcare workers. And the new guidelines that suggest over 75 and the frontline people get done first. Politicians like Marco Rubio are going to jump the line. That's just part of the deal.
Yeah.
One could argue that our elected officials, as annoying as they are in fact essential because you need to go back on Monday and override defense authorization bills, for example.
They won't be dead yet.
So, it's
what happens.
We'll take that as long as everybody else gets it too.
Okay. I understand Ron DeSantis once again inserting himself in the scientific process, and I will say this: he's doing it very strategically in places that you can't scientifically and conclusively say his interpretation of things is wrong. It's just counter to the guidance, but apparently...
Well, it's also, you don't want him to be the one speaking about it. You don't want Ron DeSantis to be your science expert.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. If you wanted to sell this alternative
even if it's true, just have your public health person say it.
Right, but, whatever. He learned from Donald Trump, you put yourself in it. He's decided... the governors, of course, have certain discretion in terms of figuring out how to allocate their allotment of vaccine, if it shows up, that is. And is taking an interesting and slightly different approach. I guess, generally speaking, the guidance was to do people over 75 first, and then, and I guess medical workers, and then on to the non-medical but essential workers, depending on how you define them, and maybe it might change from state to state, but he's decided that actually, and this is not a terrible idea, that instead of going immediately to vaccinating the Florida's version of essential workers, whether that's grocery store employees or what have you, he'd like to bump it down with the age level first and vaccinate people between 70 and 75 before getting to the varying definitions of essential workers outside of the medical field.
There's nothing
plausible.
wrong with states tweaking these guidelines just a little bit. Let's say you make the case
I don't think so, right?
that Texas is a very young state.
All right,
and
let's do
so
that.
We're going to vaccinate everybody over 80. And Florida is a very old state, like Pennsylvania, but Florida even more so. It's actually their whole industry is to be old. Because we want your olds from all over the country to move down here.
God's waiting,
and so we're going to vaccinate 60 and up because we want to make the villages safe.
Yeah, I mean that's another...
You could see that. That's an argument you can make.
I think it'd probably be okay. But I think you make an excellent point that, you want to do it, fine, but maybe have a doctor say this is why, as opposed to Ron DeSantis saying, I don't know, let's try this. Right. So that's a great point. And this, I think of even the DeSantis approach might even be perfectly valid. It's just weird that Ron DeSantis declares in, mid press conference, I got a different idea. Here's what I think we ought to do.
I mean, I can name, these are like the fingers on one hand, right? You're talking about Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Tony Blair, Angela Merkel. There's a handful of people, leaders, who could explain, here's what I'm doing and why, for this really complicated scenario like this. Right. DeSantis isn't in that group.
No.
Most politicians, if they open their mouth, already have 50% of the population not believing them.
Oh, that's true, too.
And that's not what you want if you want your elders in Florida to be vaccinated, to accept it, to voluntarily say, yes, that's a good idea. And if that's what you want, you don't want politicians being spokespeople. You just about never want that.
Yeah, we did learn that early
Rare
on.
exceptions, and I've named names, but other than that, just as a general policy,
right,
as a general technique, as a general communication strategy, you don't want the politicians being the people saying stuff like that because nobody trusts them.
Even
and
the
for
people
good
you
reason.
named, the people you named,
I like rugs, all of them.
rely on experts, and very rarely will just simply say, "This is my explanation," and that's that. They'll say, "Hey, you've heard from the experts, and now here's the decision I'm going to make."
I, as leader of this state, appointed this incredible expert here. If I'm, Andrew Cuomo, you could say I appointed a guy who's basically the quality of a Tom Frieden, who went on to become CDC director. So my health directors are like quality people. They're the farm team for the CDC. Okay. So let them speak. And my credit is I appointed them. So listen to them. I mean, that's what you say in so many words.
I think that's probably right. All right. Well, we'll see how it goes down there in Florida. It's not wrong. It's just a weird way of communicating your decision. Like maybe a bad one.
Yeah, maybe a bad one. And so and then you can't answer follow-up questions because you don't know what you're talking about.
That's another problem.
That's why it always looks so bad.
But why?
And then, of course, politicians also don't do nuance. They don't do balance. They don't do give and take. They don't do trade-offs. They speak in absolutes. And then when it doesn't come about, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Oh, well, that didn't work out, did it? It's just a real bad situation to be in because the slightest variation from what you said is you lied. Because you're a politician. You always lie. I assume you're lying. And now I caught you lying. Well, actually, I told you the truth and things changed. Well, now I don't trust you. That's exactly what you don't want. That's the situation you want to avoid. It's avoidable. It's completely avoidable. Don't be the spokesperson.
Okay. Well, DeSantis couldn't help himself. So I'll share that news with everybody, but we'll keep an eye on how far it goes.
You have to remember, in DeSantis' case in particular, but in a lot of these guys in general, they're really stupid people. They don't get it. They really don't understand. They don't want to understand.
Yeah. I guess. I don't know. DeSantis is a weird case. Another one of those Ivy League educated, but comes off as not particularly smart. So you think there's something in there somewhere, though. Maybe, but I can't find it. Maybe he lost it.
He's dumb. Okay. I don't care where he was educated. I'll take a community college smart person over an Ivy League dumb person any day of the week.
Yes. I'm just saying, since we don't have that other person yet, we're stuck with this guy. I don't understand. If he went to one of these schools, isn't it supposed to give you something, some ability to do something in a smart way? And I'm just looking around for it. I would look around for it in anybody, but I'd be, I guess I would convince
you go to those schools so that you can get yourself a broader education, get exposed to more things, make the connections so that you know who to hire for your public health person. And then you're also trained to articulate your argument a little bit better. It doesn't make you any smarter.
I thought so, but then it's not happening. So, okay. All right. Well, no need to beat up on him anymore, although you're certainly welcome to. Anyone else wants to call in?
Well, he's going to do more stuff,
and
and he's still not going to get it. And, you look at the news and you see the travel numbers, which are just hitting the roof here. And you can't tell people not to travel. They're going to travel. So you just have to prepare and batten down the hatches because we're going to be in a really bad stretch in about 2 weeks. As bad as it is right now, it's getting worse.
Oh, well. Is that a problem? I think that was what we were all doing anyway.
It's going to be a problem.
Okay.
I mean, there's going to be overwhelmed hospitals, and it's going to be bad. All the bad stuff that we said was happening is happening, and when we said it's going to be worse, it's going to be worse.
Yes. All right. Well, I believe that. Speaking of, you reminded me when you were talking about overwhelmed hospitals. I shared the story the other day of the congressman-elect from down in Louisiana, whose name escapes me now, Luke something else with an L. He's an alliterative kind of guy, I think. And he announced that he was positive for COVID-19 and that he was they tried to pull the I'm checking myself into a hospital, but purely for precautionary reasons, and I'm like, what hospital has got room for people to just say, I'm checking myself in on a precautionary basis? And I suspected that maybe it was more serious than we thought. And word was yesterday he's now in the ICU, so I guess he's just voluntarily subjecting himself to intubation or what have you, out of an abundance of caution. I don't think he's intubated yet, but has made it to ICU, and I guess they're getting ready to fax down the orders for Regeneron and fly it in from Washington or what have you as soon as Trump flies to the rescue. But anyway, wish him good luck. I'm sure it would be nice for him to be able to take the oath of office and then have to retire due to ill health. But lifelong dream, I'm sure, to put himself in the halls of Congress, maybe to be felled by COVID-19 that he probably didn't believe in before he gets there. What a story.
Right. Well, bottom line message is take the virus seriously, take everything about the virus seriously, listening to the public health people. If the politicians want to chime in, at least, check in and see what their public health folks are saying. And with that, I hope everybody has a very merry Christmas. We're going to get another storm here, but it's going to be a rainstorm with lots of wind. So hopefully things will be okay for the Monday show. We've lost power for days. It's known to happen. We do have a generator, but if the internet goes down, even the generator can't help the show get back up. So we'll keep track of that. And if you're going to be off tomorrow, I'll just check back with you on Monday, and we'll go from there. So thanks for listening, folks. We all want you to have the happiest possible holiday. Take advantage of it. And we'll talk about what happens. My worry isn't so much these next 2 weeks. It's the 2 weeks after that.
Oh, okay. Well, let's delay our
that's
worry.
That's politically, too. I mean, it's after January 6th when Trump loses yet again that I'm more worried about his brown shirts out there being activated by stuff he says.
Yeah, well, they may all be sick and can't come out. So we'll see. We'll find out soon enough. Okay, thanks, Greg. And yes, enjoy the break. We'll be back on Monday. And Monday they'll be having the floor vote, probably after the show. But we'll see what happens with the $2,000 check gambit when we return. So, okay, let's see. Other things that we can... it was, by the way... Luke Letlow is the alliterative name, triply so. Luke Letlow is the congressman in question. I finally found here the piece I put aside from Talking Points memo with the giant pop-up ads to block everything. GOP rep-elect transferred to ICU for continued COVID-19 treatment. Luke Letlow on Wednesday is transferred to an intensive care unit to continue treatment for COVID-19. Last Friday, he announced that he had tested positive for COVID-19 and initially quarantined at home. So let's see, it's Thursday now, so in less than a week. Last Friday, he said, hey, I'm positive, I'm going to quarantine at home. By the weekend, he was precautionarily, I would say preemptively, admitted to a hospital. Yeah, right. And then by Wednesday... The news was that he was in the in the ICU. Let's see, any more info? After he announced on Friday that he had COVID, was admitted to St. Francis Medical Center before being transferred over to Ochsner. Oh boy, how do we pronounce it? OCH rather, SNER. Ochsner maybe. Ochsner LSU Health Shreveport Academic Medical Center.com edu gov. Oh my God, what a long thing! It's always with the college, the naming rights on all of these things with big donors. So, Ochsner, LSU, Health, Shreveport Academic Medical Center, all happened late Tuesday night. A tweet went out from his Twitter account with a shot of the press release announcing it. He says everything's awesome and he's getting terrific care. Letlow, Representative Andrew Bouch did not specify details on Letlow's condition in the statement. Did we get any update on Bouch's own COVID-19? No, apparently not. He was the one tasked with making the announcement last Friday, and also said, by the way, I caught it too, and apparently no one cares. So, okay, LSU Health Sciences Center Chancellor G.E. Ghali, G-H-A-L-I. Anyway, he says Letlow is in stable condition in the ICU, where he is receiving the antiviral drug remdesivir and steroids, both of which President Trump was treated with when he was hospitalized for COVID-19 at Walter Reed Medical Center in October. I guess I should have asked Greg while he was here. Isn't that a different thing? I thought remdesivir was something. Is that something other than this Regeneron treatment? Regeneron, again, is still the name of the company that makes the thing and not exactly the name of the drug. But they only make one drug. And so, might as well be called Regeneron.
I think they're different.
You think they're different? Okay. I think so, too. And I think Regeneron is the monoclonal antibodies, and remdesivir is just an antiviral drug of some kind. But I guess that means if they're right in this reporting, and sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, then Trump got remdesivir and Regeneron and steroids. And interestingly enough, not hydroxychloroquine. Still, I think that is still the claim. Hydroxychloroquine people are out, by the way, with another round of claims that actually does work, and that Democrats and possibly Hugo Chavez are covering up the effectiveness studies. And who knows? Maybe that's even true. But it hasn't turned anyone around in 3 days and sent them home from the hospital when their condition deteriorated rapidly, as was the case with the president. So I still think the Regeneron stuff is the the go-to emergency treatment if you are a VIP and find yourself hospitalized and in danger from COVID-19. Okay, let's see. Our next break coming up, which is fantastic because I'm going to need some time to battle the frog in the throat once again. I can feel it coming on. Let's see. We can catch up again on some of the other weird pardons that were included in yesterday's round, and much more, of course, and more on the parliamentary situation in Congress, and what that means for setting up votes next week. And then we can wander farther afield. There are definitely some things I've been holding on to that felt like Friday stories. We'll see if I can cram them in or if I can undo all my best intentions and waste the time with something equally esoteric between now and 11 o'clock. We'll see, and be right back after this short break. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Boy, I made that quick. I ran away to try and get a little bit of the gargle in to see if I could undo the ill effects of the early morning scramble that left me unable to give that stuff a try once again. So I now have an arsenal at my disposal, but 1 minute is not enough to brew up any more tea. So I went with the gargle on this one. We'll see if it helps any. It feels like it did, and now I'm worried I'm becoming addicted to it, which is horrible because it tastes like hell. Imagine being addicted to something totally disgusting. Well, it's not hard to believe in this day and age. All right, let's see. What did I want to bring up? Yes, okay. By the way, yes, the parliamentary standing, the parliamentary procedure, and our posture on the COVID relief bill and everything else. The 4-minute video that Trump released, I still see some confusion about that out there, although I think it's willful confusion. The 4-minute video in which Trump bashes the COVID relief bill not only as inadequate in terms of direct payments to people and families, but also as having been inexplicably, in his view, larded up with all sorts of irrelevant provisions. And he goes on in the video to say, basically the idea is that he wants people to say, to agree with him in saying, this is supposed to be about COVID relief, and not only are you giving us $600 instead of $2,000, not that $2,000 is necessarily adequate either, who knows, depends on your situation, of course, but these $600 checks are totally inadequate to the task. But imagine this, they're being stingy with you, $600 for you, and billions for other countries. How is it that Americans are getting these tiny little bits and pieces of pocket change, and other countries are getting billions? That doesn't make any sense, except, It makes sense if you, or I guess his objections that the bill doesn't make sense, makes sense if you don't know anything about how this bill came to be put together. The reminder here is that this is not a COVID relief bill that they then decided to cram a bunch of stuff into. It's a COVID relief bill that got crammed into another bill that had a bunch of stuff in it already. This omnibus spending bill is annual appropriations and spending for several of the main departments of government. That's what was moving. And then they said, by the way, we're also going to put $600 checks into this bill with the spending for the rest of the government, which is okay and makes sense because, after all, well, COVID relief is government spending, and so is the rest of this bill, so it makes a certain amount of sense. It is December 20 whatever when they went ahead and did it. We're running out of time for this Congress to act before they dissolve on January 3rd and swear in the new Congress. And if they don't get the bill passed before then they have to start all over again, more or less, after January 3rd. So they said, we got to pass both of these things. Why don't we make it extra efficient, combine them into one bill, then we can pass them on the same day with a minimal number of votes, and we don't have to hold everybody here for much longer, and they might even be able to go home and spend Christmas with their families, if that's something they care to do. We don't know. I can't speak for others. Anyway, so that's how they all got to be in the same bill, but Trump played it as if these were last-minute late additions to a COVID bill and therefore irrelevant to what was supposed to be going on, and that's not the case. I also see that his fans and supporters, and some of whom claim to be, it's not that I'm a big Trump fan, but I do agree there's no reason why Egypt should get $1.3 billion from us, or whatever it was that we were giving them, in a COVID relief bill. And then, so yesterday, lots of people spent time pointing out not only what had actually happened procedurally, but that I think almost all, if not every single one, of the objections that Trump articulated in this crafted speech that he gave. And again, I'll reiterate, I think it's actually an important point. He read from the script, and it was very obvious. And even when he reads from scripts, he usually allows himself a few ad-libbed asides, even if they don't add any substance. You know, he'll just say something dumb. Like, I've lost my place reading it, so he'll just say, so true, until he can find his place again. But no, as far as I could tell, I don't even know if I really sat through all 4 minutes or not. I think I did actually play it initially. And he doesn't deviate from the script very much. And I think that's because I don't believe he really understands what's going on. And somebody probably strategized in the White House for him, if we just play it as though this is a COVID relief bill that's been larded up with all sorts of other non-essential and esoteric spending, maybe we can turn people against it. And I don't think he understood what they meant by that, but they said, just read the script and you'll be okay. Anyway, as it turns out, every single example that he brings up in this script as wasteful, ridiculous, irrelevant, unrelated spending is, of course, one, actually part of the omnibus government spending bill that they put together, and two, all of them were requested by the administration as part of its budget. So, every objection he made, money for this country, money for that country, almost down to the dollar, that's how much the president's budget requested be appropriated for these countries in the regular foreign aid bill. I think I saw a couple of his supporters out there on Twitter trying to make the case that this was supplemental money, that this is, we give foreign aid all the time, but this is an extra helping of it that they crammed into something else, or into this COVID relief bill, or into this omnibus bill, and that's not true either. This is the regular annual appropriation that we ordinarily give as a matter of course to, in the case of foreign aid, to these other countries, but also to anything else, the other scientific studies that he targeted. A perennial favorite for people who like to find what looks like ridiculous sounding programs or spending. They always love to go into the environmental studies. Oh, they're going to study the mating habits of this stupid endangered bird. There's a reason why they chose that bird, and it's connected to the wider environment and the health of the planet. And screw you, let's all die because you think it's funny to talk about the tufted whatever the hell it is. And so are some of those things. Sage grouses, I think, have been subject to these things. Snail darter fish in the past have been subject of some of these studies. A perennial favorite of the Republicans. But again, in this case, these were all things that the president's own budget, not that he has any idea what was in it, requested be spent. And this is not an extra appropriations bill on top of the annual ones. It's the annual ones that they screwed up and weren't able to pass because Republicans are foot-dragging idiots and make objection to everything. But yes, this is the normal annual appropriations that they were going to make, and then some $600 checks on top of it. In fact, I think I saw pointed out somewhere that in particular, this 1.3, I think it is, $billion of foreign aid for Egypt came up in his speech as though that were somehow weird and esoteric, like we never gave foreign aid to Egypt before. But somebody pointed out, I think it was on Twitter too, and so I should take a look for it. But I think the Egypt appropriation is a part of an ongoing promise of continuing aid from the United States to Egypt, growing out of their acceptance of the Camp David Accords in the late 70s that normalized relations and established peace between Egypt and Israel and demilitarized the Sinai. You remember it was like a momentous thing and a historical moment and something you wouldn't want to undo. Glenn Kessler, as a matter of fact, I guess in his fact-checking capacity for the Washington Post, says this, he picks up on Jamie Dupree's tweet. Jamie Dupree, a Capitol Hill reporter, who says, President Trump last night criticized foreign aid in the omnibus spending bill approved by Congress, which is obviously ridiculous enough, but specifically citing $1.3 billion in U.S. aid for Egypt's military. $1.3 billion for Egypt is exactly how much the Trump administration asked Congress for in the 2021 budget, which is what's being fulfilled here. Glenn Kessler goes further and reminds us this is the annual payment to Egypt that had been in every federal budget since 1987. I would have thought it might even have started earlier. At this exact amount, $1.3 billion annually, all the way back to 87, as a result of the Camp David Accords. Wonders never cease on how little this president knows about anything. But then, did I know? No, I didn't. But, I don't have a presidential staff either. And now I'm wondering whether it really goes back to 87 or started earlier. There's plenty of responses to it. I don't know whether any of those are directly on point there, but that's where we started to see people chiming in saying, well, no, random guy that I had felt compelled to answer, but saying his point still stands, he says, Trump's point. Congress decided to pass a COVID-19 stimulus bill that included foreign aid and in total gave more money to other countries than the American people. The fact that this is something we do every year is irrelevant. Well, no. His point only stands if you ignore what actually happened, which is that this is a foreign aid bill, plus other things, that we decided to add COVID relief money to, and it's not ridiculous, and it's not out of the ordinary, and it's not extra money either. It's the same amount. You could object to the fact that there's foreign aid on principle, but that, that's a different story, and not particularly helpful, I guess I would also add. But, all right, let me mark this one so I can include this for you in the roundup. But just so you know what's going on and what sort of misconceptions there are out there so that you can help and correct them if you want to when you run into them as well. All right, let's see. I guess on the pardons issue, let's see. I wanted to share with you the story that I mentioned about the police officer who had somehow snagged a pardon for herself and all this too. Did I am pretty sure I had this one. There we are. Craig Whitlock's tweet saying that it would get lost in the shuffle. He includes, and there's a little bit more to his tweeting too. He includes a story or two on this Washington Post, though focused specifically on the pardon of the police officer. Whitlock goes on to say it's Officer Stephanie Moore, M-O-H-R, likely would have gotten away with her crimes except for a former Post reporter, Ruben Castaneda, who wrote several stories about the out-of-control canine unit in Prince George's County, Maryland. Here's just one of his pieces on Moore, a file piece saying from when? 2001. File alleges canine, and not just a piece on file, but the file is actually in the title here. File alleges canine officer was abusive. Way back in 2001, this piece. Craig goes on to say Moore's supervisors knew about her record of brutality but kept her on the job. Back in the 1990s, the Prince George's police had a terrible problem with, you'll never believe it, excessive force and police shootings. It took many years and numerous exposés by the Washington Post before things began to improve. And now, of course, part of that improvement, well, I don't know if it undoes the improvement, but it does mean that people who were finally caught and held accountable that led to the improvement in the Prince George's Police Department anyway, now I guess get to walk on that accountability. So the current article in it, Washington Post's got Trump pardons former Prince George's County police officer. And here it is. Granted a pardon on Wednesday to former officer who was convicted of a federal civil rights violation for releasing her police dog on an unarmed homeless man in 1995. A federal jury convicted Stephanie Moore in 2001 on a felony charge after prosecutors said she set her dog to bite one of two men police stopped during a search for burglars in Tacoma Park. White House officials released a statement saying Moore's clemency is supported by the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund and the Fraternal Order of Police, but who cares? I noticed that they were releasing in their press releases about the things who supported these pardons, as though that made any difference. But he was looking to blame it on other people, I guess. She served 10 years in prison for releasing her canine partner on a burglary suspect in 1995, resulting in a bite wound requiring 10 stitches, the statement said. Officer Moore was a highly commended member of the police force prior to her prosecution. I don't know what highly commended is supposed to mean, but usually they say highly decorated, but I suppose that's an acceptable synonym, unless she's just never gotten any awards at all and they're making it up and figured if they said commended rather than decorated, it was vague enough to cover up for the fact that she's not been highly anything. I don't know, though. Today's action recognizes that service and the lengthy term that Ms. Moore served in prison, the statement added. Moore's conviction came amid a Justice Department investigation of civil rights violations by the Prince George's County Police Department and a series of lawsuits complaining of excessive use of force by canine units. Moore was convicted after her first trial ended with a deadlocked jury. She was among 29 people who received a pardon or commutation from Trump on Wednesday night, including, of course, we didn't even mention yet, Charles Kushner, Jared's dad, and Roger Stone and Paul Manafort, two of the president's former advisors who were convicted as part of the FBI's probe of Russian interference in the 2016 election. I suppose we could take a quick look at the older article that Ruben Castaneda had written back in 2001, just to give you the contemporaneous flavor of what was going on. Let's see. The PG County, Prince George's, around here we just say PG County, police officer charged in federal court with releasing her police dog on an unarmed, unresisting Mexican immigrant, gee whiz, has a pattern of improperly using the dog on minorities and threatening minorities, sometimes with racial epithets. according to court papers filed by federal prosecutors. In a filing last week, and again, this is way back in May of 2001, in U.S. District Court in Greenbelt, federal prosecutors detailed 5 instances in which they said Officer Stephanie Moore improperly released her police dog on unresisting people or threatened to do so. Prosecutors described a 6th incident in which Moore manhandled a neighborhood boy who had run across her lawn. She's a real pleasant person. Each of Moore's alleged victims in those cases was black, according to court papers. In addition, the police department has twice found that Moore, then age 30, made false statements to a supervisor, according to the court papers. Despite the incidents, which resulted in at least 4 civil lawsuits accusing Moore of brutality, and the fact that Moore was flagged as a potential problem officer by the police department's early warning system, fat lot of good that did, Moore has received virtually no discipline, according to the court papers and court testimony. She was briefly suspended for the incident with the neighbor child, and she was given informal counseling and a written reprimand for threatening to release a dog on a family that was cooperating with officers who were looking for a suspect, according to court papers. Not even somebody that was the suspect. Just, if you don't give us enough cooperation, my dog will bite you. Wow. Moore was fined $100 on a finding that she made a false statement to a supervisor, which Moore said she is appealing. The incident involving her alleged threats to the family has not been disclosed previously, as officers searched a house for a man who was wanted by authorities in California. A woman who lived in the home asked Moore to move her barking police dog farther from her, according to court papers. Moore refused to move her dog, then threatened the woman that if the suspect was in the house, she would turn the animal loose to bite not only the suspect, but the resident's, quote, black ass as well. Thanks a lot. That according to this court filing. The 25-page court summary of Moore's alleged history of excessive force and dishonesty signals that prosecutors hope to go after Moore much more aggressively than they did during the first trial in March, when a federal jury in Greenbelt acquitted her of conspiracy and deadlocked on a charge of deprivation of civil rights. Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen M. Dettelbach and Alexander H. Busansky, a trial attorney in the Justice Department's Civil Rights Section, argued to U.S. District Judge Deborah Chasino at the pleading that they should be allowed to introduce evidence of the incidents in Moore's retrial, scheduled for July 31st. Moore's attorney, David Simpson, said the allegations of misconduct by Moore were overstated. Stephanie Moore was a very active canine officer. What does that mean? She's probably going to have more incidents which will be called into question than the average patrol officer would have. That's bad, David. Don't say that. It comes with the territory, is his claim. Simpson said prosecutors tried to introduce evidence about many of the incidents in the trial, or rather in the earlier trial, but were barred from doing so by Judge Chasino. The failure of police officials to take serious disciplinary action against Moore is emblematic of how the department often fails to deal with problem officers, said Edith Flemings Hall, the president of the Prince George's County NAACP, and a member of a task force appointed by County Executive Wayne Curry last year to review that police department. The task force was not able to determine there was any consistent discipline applied based on infractions by officers, Hall said. Moore is accused of releasing her dog on, in this case that really landed her in trouble, Ricardo G. Mendez, behind a Tacoma Park printing shop on September 21st, 1995. Prosecutors allege that while Moore released her police dog at the direction of a senior officer, prosecutors allege that, yes, while it was at the order or direction of a senior officer, Anthony Delosier, Officer James Santos beat Mendez's companion, Jorge Herrera Cruz, for no reason. Oh, okay. I thought that was going elsewhere. But so they roughed up both of them for no reason. One got the dog and one got a beating. The while was about the fact that it happened at the same time. In the papers they filed last week, prosecutors said Santos, an unindicted co-conspirator, has admitted in sworn testimony that he beat Herrera Cruz. The jury acquitted Delosier of a charge of deprivation of civil rights and deadlocked on a charge of conspiracy. Moore still faces charges of deprivation of civil rights, and Delosier still faces the charge of conspiracy. This was back in 2001 anyway. Jurors deadlocked on the single count against Brian Rich, a former Tacoma Park police detective who later became an FBI agent who was charged with helping to cover up the dog attack by charging the alleged victims with burglary despite a lack of any evidence. Chazano ruled last month that the government did not have sufficient evidence to retry Rich and dismissed the charge against him. The court papers detail 4 civil lawsuits filed against Moore, who was a member of the Canine Squad until she transferred more than 2 years ago. Each of the lawsuits has been previously reported in the Washington Post. 2 of the lawsuits ended with county attorneys agreeing to pay settlements. 1 lawsuit went to trial, and Moore was found not liable. The 4th is scheduled to be tried in Prince George's Circuit Court in 2 weeks. In that case, Jason Tyree alleges that he was in an office building to use a bathroom when police chased him. Tyree alleges he ran but then surrendered and lay on the ground, at which point Moore used a racial epithet against him while releasing her police dog and ordering it to attack him. Prince George's County Police Officer Stephanie Moore is to be retried on a civil rights charge. And guess what? For that, she was convicted. And I guess if she was sentenced to 10 years back in 2001 or thereabouts, she would have served her term and been out. And Trump reaches down into the well of racism and rescues this one for some reason. And I guess expunges her record and gives her a pardon. Why? I don't know. Well, there you go. I just thought that was, pretty crazy. All right. Oh, yes, here's a question for the staff here at KITM headquarters. I note as I jump back to Twitter, Darwin asking, who was that? Your producer in the background saying about the question about remdesivir. Yes. And have you had the Coke yet? Have you had a can of Coke yet today? I have not. All right. Gil's waiting for you to open that can of Coke. So we're delayed because we're on vacation days today. So I don't know. I guess that caffeine delivery method can be delayed a little bit today for holiday preparations. And there's some stuff baking in the background too. You guys can't smell it over the radio, but it's making it hard to do a show. No fault there, and I don't mind being disrupted this way. Okay, time for another break coming up here, but let's see. Some other things that we might be able to squeeze in. There's another weird pardon. Kyle Griffin, I think, brings this one to everybody's attention. Trump has also pardoned Jesse Benton, a former Rand Paul aide. Why? How? Well, it doesn't really matter. I don't know what he did, but here's the deal. Why did he get the pardon? Benton, well, one, he was a former Rand Paul aide. He was convicted of an attempt to buy an endorsement for Ron Paul's 2012 presidential bid. Remember that? Rand Paul, it also turns out, is the uncle of Jesse Benton's wife. So, what? So, Rand Paul's niece is married to this guy, Jesse Benton, and he made Jesse Benton one of his aides, but also Jesse Benton was, I guess, involved in Ron Paul's 2012 presidential bid and tried to buy an endorsement. So he's just been hanging around the Paul family for a while. I'm curious about how old he is and when did he marry in. And it would be even weirder, don't you think, if he was like working for Ron Paul and then working for Rand Paul and then married Rand Paul's niece after that? Or is it like, well, his niece says Jesse needs a job, and Ron gives him a job, and Rand gives him a job. That would be easier to understand. Also weird, but not quite as creepy as the other way. I prefer to think of it the creepy way, quite honestly, and that I bet it's right too, because they're creepy people. I'm not afraid to say so. I'm speaking. I don't know. I'm just making it up as I go along. Jesse Benton, by the way, just in case you were thinking he's only a creep that hangs around around the Paul family. Benton also managed Mitch McConnell's 2014 re-election campaign. So what a guy. Convicted of an attempt to buy an endorsement for Ron Paul in 2012 and managed Mitch McConnell's 2014 campaign, and then got himself in trouble and got convicted of something and now needs to be pardoned as well. Ron Paul, of course, claimed to be from Texas all that time, right? Rand Paul claims to be from Kentucky. Mitch, of course, also from Kentucky. It's weird. It does begin to look like maybe Jesse Benton is just following the Paul family around and looking for a way to get himself on the inside. And I guess marrying the niece might have been a great idea. Or, maybe they're just working in close proximity for so many years and love blossomed, if you prefer the Hallmark Channel version of it. But okay. Anyway, we'll probably never find out which one is actually true, and we don't care. When it comes to a combination of Ron Paul, Rand Paul, and Mitch McConnell, I'm perfectly willing to believe something that I totally made up, but that makes it sound like they're a bunch of pervs. I'm just declaring that to be the truth. 'Tis the season, after all. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. You're on Netroots Radio. Let's see, how am I going to cram all this stuff into one more segment? This is why we needed to do a Friday show. But, okay, well, at any rate, one update from my other remote producer, my mom, who now has, I guess this one is one of those okay texts to get in the middle of the show because it's like relevant to the show, right? So, if it's just chatting, we can wait until after. But here, how about this? President Trump has already received multiple treatments since his COVID-19 diagnosis last week. This grabbed from the papers back in October, I guess, just in order to straighten out which treatments did Trump get. His treatment began with a leading drug candidate, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals 2 antibody combination, or cocktail. Right, Regeneron's the company. They call the cocktail, how do you even pronounce this? It's from Regeneron, REGN-CoV2. That's the COVID-2, right? SARS-CoV-2, right? But REGN is clearly Regeneron. And how do you pronounce it out loud? REGN-CoV2. I don't know. That's probably why people say Regeneron. Anyway, within days, his medical team announced that the antiviral remdesivir from Gilead Sciences was added to the interventions given to the president. So, okay, that establishes that. The treatment regimen, which incorporated dexamethasone, that's the steroids, on Sunday, a steroid typically reserved for serious or more advanced COVID-19 cases, has been rolled out both aggressively and quickly. So, if the report is to be believed from down in Louisiana that, Luke Letlow is getting the same treatment, and they're referring here to remdesivir and the steroids. I guess the steroid he'd be getting, if that's right, is dexamethasone, which again is typically reserved for serious or advanced COVID-19 cases, which he may be because now he's in the ICU. But just goes to show that he was, fudging it in his initial press release. Par for the course, Republican congressman. Still, though, noticeably missing from the claims, at least in those press releases, is that he has gotten a hold of the Regeneron product, which Trump apparently continues to reserve for himself and his close inner circle and nobody else. And again, something I track, where over 117,000 people have died of COVID since Trump said, in a video he went out of his way to make. Nobody asked him to make this thing. He wasn't asked a question or anything. He said, okay, well, you'll have to hold all additional researcher statements until the end of this statement, please.
So
apparently not.
No.
Please, go ahead. Why do I have a show?
That
Can you hear this?
The other two treatments were already FDA approved for other things. The Regeneron treatment was not.
Right.
So he got it under the special exemption rule or whatever,
yeah.
which I guess is a much bigger deal and involves more things to do than to give people treatments that aren't necessarily meant for COVID, but that are approved for other things. So maybe that's why that guy hasn't gotten the Regeneron treatment.
But the president can just kick everybody's ass and make them give it to him. So what the hell? Where are you at, Trump? The answer is at Mar-a-Lago. But yeah, okay. Did everybody hear that? I don't even know if I can repeat that. But this is what goes on in this house. In case you thought that this was only for the radio and the procedural, discussions, it's just me. No, it's true. Very well explained. I hope everybody heard it. But I don't know. I mean, I guess so. It may just, but I do think that the Regeneron has gotten its emergency use authorization.
I think emergency use authorizations are individual.
Individual, really? Mm-hmm. What a pain in the ass. You doctors really know how to make things complicated. But probably a good idea because that's exactly how you should be treating people on an individual basis. But okay, so it may be that an emergency use authorization, emergency use authorization needs to be done on an individual basis. I would have thought that would have been more a wider authorization. They certainly made it sound like that's what they were going for. I mean, remember, again, this is Trump's video. He says, I'm going to immediately sign an order, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, then he was promising that he was going to give out the Regeneron product free to every senior in America, whatever that meant. And then he didn't. But in addition, the 117,000 people who probably thought maybe their lives will be saved did not have their lives saved, and they died. And there's some 18 million or how many millions more cases? 18 million cases in total now. So I think we're probably about 11 million cases in total that have come down with COVID-19 since he said he would be able to give them this instant cure. And if the emergency use authorization is in fact individual, then there was no way he was ever going to get Regeneron on an emergency basis to every vulnerable senior in America, and he should never have said it. I still think it's one of the most egregious things he's done, but now it has rivals. And I think probably one of them would be some of those pardons that he issued. In particular, perhaps the pardon for the Blackwater mercenaries, who there's been some real interesting reporting on those pardons and what they really mean for for the people of Iraq who were victimized by these crazy mercenaries. And there were some very troubling and heartbreaking statements being issued over the past couple of days of people who participated as witnesses in those trials of the Blackwater mercenaries who came and said, I came to America to participate in this trial. I put myself under American jurisdiction to participate anyway. I don't know where they held the trial of these mercenaries because I thought that, we were told in the middle of all this stuff, even though we should naturally have resented the hell out of the American occupation, we were told that things were going to get better, that Americans believed in law and order and were going to, essentially, at the end of this stupid occupation, gift this to us. We were going to get the vote. We were going to dye our fingers purple. We were going to have law and order and be a westernized style democracy, even though we were able to retain our own Iraqi identity. But guess what? It's all for nothing. And it turns out that Americans are full of it and they don't believe in law and order. And, I guess we could have told you that, but we weren't, it's not what we were going to tell you from the podium. Ari Fleischer wasn't going to tell you that. But I guess you figured it out eventually on your own anyway. Okay. So there you have it. Let's see. Other things I need to cram in. There's so many of them here. Let me move on to one or two others. Okay. I'll bolster one of the earlier stories. I'll share this with you, but somebody made a great compilation at CNN of Trump's specific list of objections to the spending package that he made in that 4-minute video, and showing itemized one by one Trump complaint. $85.5 million for assistance to Cambodia. and then putting it alongside the Trump budget proposal, which was for $82.5 million. Not 85.5, but 82.5. Aha, caught you. You upped it by $3 million of assistance for Cambodia. Trump complaining of $134 million to Burma, when in fact Trump's own budget proposal was for $131.5 million to Burma. The Egypt thing is in there, but you get the idea. Pakistan, Belize, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Panama, all complained about in his 4-minute video, plus the $40 million for the Kennedy Center. It's exactly what he asked for the Kennedy Center. Smithsonian, same story. National Gallery of Art, same story. The reason that money was in that bill was Donald Trump asked for it to be in that bill, and now he's throwing a tantrum that they did what he wanted. So we'll see how getting a deal with him goes later on, I suppose. And as Greg mentioned earlier, there's still the possibility of pocket veto, since we are now getting close to the end of the 116th Congress, which has to dissolve itself on January 3rd. So how many days are left? I don't know. We got to count it out. But you remember how the pocket veto works? That ordinarily, if Congress passes a bill and the president doesn't sign it, but also doesn't veto it, after 10 days, not including Sundays and holidays and various other ways of counting, after 10 days, it becomes law anyway, as if he had signed it, unless it happens that the 10-day period expires, and during that 10-day period, Congress adjourns or dissolves itself, and is essentially that there's nowhere for a veto message to be returned to, because Congress doesn't exist anymore. It's dissolved. It has adjourned sine die. That is a pocket veto, and you don't have to actively veto it, but you also, by not signing it, kill it, because it happens at the end of a session of Congress instead. And that can now happen as we are getting closer to these things. So the NDAA he had to veto because the 10 days was going to run out, and it would just be enacted into law if he didn't touch it. But if the NDAA gets vetoed, and, if they either don't override it, they'll just have to wait until next time. If they override it, he doesn't get a chance to pocket veto that one. But this other one, the Cash Act, for instance, he could still say, well, I'm not going to sign it, and I'm not going to veto it. And he could go around saying, I support it. I asked for $2,000. I don't know, I lost all my pens. And the effect of it could be, anyway, that if it happens that the 10 days don't all run out before January 3rd, by the time it gets to his desk, he can pocket veto it and it goes away, and he can pretend he didn't, I didn't mean to do that. It just accidentally happened. Anyway, that hangs out there as a possibility as well. Let me see. Other stories I wanted to get to you here. I'm just looking quickly through everything here. Salon has a very interesting story, which I think you probably got to keep an eye on. Roger Solenberger wrote this one up. I'm just going to have to do lightning round here, and you're going to have to do all this reading on your own. But you got extra days in this long weekend to do it. In a new court filing, I want to put this up against the pardons that he issued, basically pardoning everybody who testified in somewhere along the line in the Mueller investigation, particularly those people who obstructed justice so that Mueller was never able to assemble a solid enough case to simply say, yeah, either I say you got to impeach the guy or indict the guy, or you need to reach that conclusion by yourself. In addition to covering up for the president, there was still more cover-up going on outside of this. And I guess everybody was seeing Bill Barr off the other day, and no one was fooled into thinking he was a good guy, but I think they were glad to see, at least on the way out the door, he did say, yeah, there was no election fraud, and yeah, you don't need to investigate Hunter Biden. Well, if you need more reason to hate him again, because again, 'tis the season. In new court filing, Bill Barr accused of arresting impeachment witnesses to shield Trump. Before you feel too bad about these poor bastards that were arrested in order to shield Trump, be aware that it is Lev Parnas. Lev Parnas, an indicted former associate of Rudy Giuliani, who ostensibly has turned against Trump and wants to help convict him. So we like that, anyway, if true. He alleges his arrest was part of a plot to protect Trump. You remember when they got arrested at the airport? Lev Parnas, former business associate of Rudy Giuliani, made explosive allegations against outgoing Attorney General Bill Barr in a federal court filing on Tuesday. Parnas, who is under indictment for campaign finance violations and fraud charges, has accused Barr of timing his arrest last fall in order to prevent him from testifying at the House impeachment hearings. Very clever, but possibly illegal. We'll just leave it at that. You can read the details of the story. It's a fun read, and you should be up to date on it and see if anything comes of it or whether they just let Barr ride off into the sunset. By way of connecting everything to the Georgia runoffs, good piece here that Joan put together after we spoke on Tuesday for Wednesday publication about Kelly Loeffler adding fuel to Trump's dumb tirade and endorsing the dumbest part of it. Kelly Loeffler, like many Republicans, put in the same position, but she still has to run for re-election, see? And will face the voters on is facing them now, and the decision ends on January 5th. But she's one of many Republicans who had to say, yes, I voted for the Trump administration's budget requests and voted for them as part of the omnibus package. And then he came out and made this stupid criticism and put out the 4-minute video pretending that he had nothing to do with the requests that ended up in this bill. And I'm going to endorse that. I now say I will be a no on this wasteful spending that I was a yes on last week. All right. Yes, Rebecca Romans, unfortunately, I do have to mention for you, no pre-recorded show for tomorrow. Very sad. I'll be up getting ready for work and look forward to listening to you. I feel bad about that, but we've managed to do pre-recorded shows for a lot of these things, and now I just have too much to do between now and tomorrow. And but there's so much to tell you. I do feel like we're missing out on this stuff. So maybe we can arrange it for the New Year's holiday, but I don't have to wrap anything for people or distribute good cheer necessarily on New Year's Day. It's all been done on New Year's Eve next time, but maybe we'll be able to catch up that way. I always feel bad leaving you without a brand new show. We can perhaps dig up a fun rerun that might be nice to hear again, or maybe make you sad that everything is so terrible now and we were so happy way back then. But maybe I can dig up a more recent rerun where we were already sad. How about that? Just so I don't put you on a roller coaster. All right. Let's see. Other things I wanted to bring to your attention. Quick hit again. Written up in Politico. Kyle Cheney wrote this one up. Over a story developing over in the House side. 2 Republican proxy votes undermine McCarthy-led suit to end the practice. Long story short on this one, there are new proxy voting rules passed by the House to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic and the possibility that the House couldn't always safely get together and cast those votes, or the members who should be quarantining weren't forced to come into the chamber all the time to cast their votes. And the House Republicans, several of them, have filed suit saying that it's unconstitutional and seeking to end the practice. So again, long story short here is that 2 of the members who have joined the suit saying that proxy voting is unconstitutional have since exercised that right to cast proxy votes. And so now the House counsel for the Democratic majority is saying they need to be perhaps dismissed from the suit, and maybe the whole suit needs to be dismissed altogether, as they seem pretty happy to take advantage of these available so-called unconstitutional procedures when it benefits them. So, pretty annoying, but you might be interested in reading the details in the Politico piece also over the weekend. I have that for you as well. And then, let's see, what other stories do I need to share with you and perhaps read at length? That one was pretty interesting. I got to scroll down a little bit more. Oh, okay, here's another short hit news from The Hill that says, you'll remember the disputed race in Iowa. I forget which district it was, but the contest between Rita Hart, the Democrat, and the person they currently consider to be the representative-elect, Marionette Miller Meeks, the Republican. Apparently, Rita Hart says, yes, she's going to go forward with her challenge and has, in fact, will be asking the House to consider examining that race and has filed her paperwork, essentially. So putting the House on the spot in case anybody thought that she wasn't going to go through with it. She's done so, and they'll have to decide what to do on January 3rd, although that can include deferring their decision until later. But just to let you know, that case is going forward. I'll share the Hill's reporting on that if you would like the details, but just something we need to keep an eye on for January 3rd. Yes. And here's the response from that witness in the Blackwater contractors pardon issue, so I can share that response with you too. Let's see. What else do I think I want to add in here? Here we go. Why don't I read you this thing? I thought this is a total departure from everything we've been discussing, but I would have done it normally on a Friday. This is just a very interesting story from the Kansas City Star. Just seems important to share with everybody. The Truth in Black and White is the title here. An apology from the Kansas City Star. Don't know if I'll really get through the whole thing, but I definitely want to give you the gist of what's going on here. Mike Fannin has the byline on this one from just the other day, originally published on December 20th. By the way, it's also available as a podcast if you'd like to listen to it elsewhere. I could just play that, right? No, I'll give you this story. Today, we are telling the story of a powerful local business that has done wrong. For 140 years, it has been one of the most influential forces in shaping Kansas City and the region. And yet, for much of its early history, through sins of both commission and omission, it disenfranchised, ignored, and scorned generations of black Kansas Cityans. It reinforced Jim Crow laws and redlining. Decade after early decade, it robbed an entire community of opportunity, dignity, justice, and recognition, and that business is the Kansas City Star. Before I say more, I feel it to be my moral obligation to express what is in the hearts and minds of the leadership and staff of an organization that is nearly as old as the city it loves and covers. We are sorry. The Kansas City Star prides itself on holding power to account. Today, we hold up the mirror to ourselves to see the historic role we have played through both action and inaction in shaping and misshaping Kansas City's landscape. It is time that we own our history. It is well past time for an apology, acknowledging as we do that the sins of our past still reverberate today. This spring, the Memorial Day death of George Floyd in Minneapolis beneath the knee of a white police officer ignited protests worldwide over racial injustice, and in doing so it has forced institutions to look inward. Inside the Star, reporters and editors discussed how an honest examination of our own past might help us move forward. What started as a suggestion from a reporter, Mara Rose Williams, quickly turned into a full-blown examination of the Star's coverage of race and the black community dating to our founding in 1880. Today, the Star presents a 6-part package. We'll only get through one, I guess. It is the result of a team of reporters who dug deeply into the archives of the Star and what was once its sister paper, the Kansas City Times. They pored over thousands of pages of digitized and microfilmed stories, comparing the coverage to how these same events were covered in the black press, most notably the Kansas City Call and the Kansas City Sun, each of which chronicled critical stories the white dailies ignored or gave short shrift. Very intriguing story. Our reporters searched court documents, archival collections, congressional testimony, minutes of meetings and digital databases. Periodically, as they researched, editors and reporters convened panels of scholars and community leaders to discuss the significant milestones of black life in Kansas City that were overlooked or underplayed by the Star and the Times. Critically, we sought some of those who lived through the events that the project explored. They include victims of the 1977 flood and students, now long into adulthood, of the illegally segregated Kansas City public schools. We talked to retired Star and Times reporters and editors, many of whom, along with other colleagues in their time, recognized institutional inertia and fought for greater racial inclusion. Reporters were frequently sickened by what they found. Decades of coverage that depicted black Kansas Cityans as criminals living in a crime-laden world. They felt shame at what was missing, the achievements, aspirations, and milestones of an entire population routinely overlooked, as if black people were invisible. Reporters felt regret that the paper's historic coverage not only did a disservice to black Kansas Cityans, but also to white readers deprived of the opportunity to understand the true richness black citizens brought to Kansas City. Like most metro newspapers of the early to mid-20th century, the Star was a white newspaper produced by white reporters and editors for white readers and advertisers. Having the Star or Times thrown in your driveway was a family tradition passed down to sons and daughters, but not in black families. Their children grew up with little hope of ever being mentioned in the city's largest and most influential newspapers unless they got in trouble. Negative portrayals of black Kansas Cityans buttressed stereotypes and played a role in keeping the city divided. In the pages of the Star, when black people were written about, they were cast primarily as the perpetrators or victims of crime, advancing a toxic narrative. Other violence, meantime, was tuned out. The Star and the Times wrote about military action in Europe, but not about black families whose homes were being bombed just down the street. Even the black cultural icons that Kansas City would one day claim with pride were largely overlooked. Native son Charlie Parker, Bird Parker, right, didn't get a significant headline in the Star until he died. And even then, his name was misspelled and his age was wrong. But white businessman J.C. Nichols got plenty of ink. His advertisements promoting segregated communities ran prominently in the Star and the Times. Nichols, who developed the Country Club Plaza, was a protege of the Star's founder, William Rockhill Nelson, who enthusiastically supported his effort. Mid-century, as civil rights and skirmishes against desegregation dawned, the Star and Times remained largely on the sidelines. "We don't need stories about these people," the editor at the time, Roy Roberts, reportedly said. This was the same editor featured on the cover of Time magazine in 1948, who used to have his driver take him and a coterie of other white editors down to the Kansas City Club for highballs, cards, a sauna, and roast beef sandwiches between deadlines. As much as the Star and Times shaped attitudes in the city, it was also shaped by them. Or rather by them. Appalling and biased is how community members we met described the newspaper's desegregation coverage in particular. It was only a change in leadership in the 1960s that would alter the newspaper's course and launch the modern era at the Star. It effectively started in the Deep South, where a young reporter named Charles W. Goosewell would send regular dispatches from the front lines of the civil rights struggle. The staff diversified. Black reporters, men and women, were hired on. Still, missteps followed. In 1968, 5 black men and 1 black teenager were killed over 3 days of rioting in Kansas City at the time the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was to be buried, having been assassinated, of course, by a white man's bullet only days prior. At least 4, and perhaps all, were shot by police. A mayor's commission determined that most were innocent victims, and yet there was no follow-up newspaper probe as there would be today. No independent investigation. No calls for the officers to be charged or for the police chief to resign. Nearly a decade later, raging waters surged in the deadly flood of 1977. The Star and the Times quickly dubbed it the Plaza Flood. That set the stage for the papers, both lacking the staff diversity to challenge assumptions, to focus mainly on property damage at the Country Club Plaza, and not so much on the 25 people who died. including 8 black residents. That same year, a reader named Thomas A. Webster would hit a hopeful note in a letter to the editor saying, "No longer are blacks and news about them deliberately ignored or purposely slanted. No more is the reading public as abysmally aware or uninformed about black citizens as in the past." It was a low bar, but the Star had finally crossed it. That was 43 years ago, and progress is still being made and still necessary. For some black leaders, there is still an inherent fear in dealing with the mainstream white media. Well, there is good news, but of course we can't get to all of this or the 6-part package that's coming after this. But I just thought it seemed such a remarkable thing for this particular paper to do, and just a great choice at random for cities. This could be happening anywhere, of course, but a great place to start. I wanted to bring it to your attention, and I recommend that you read the rest of it and read through their 6-part series, and maybe encourage your own hometown papers to do the same sort of introspection if necessary. Take that into the break. We'll be back on Monday. Justice Putnam will take you into the holiday next.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, things as usual, collected from around the country and around the world. Our esoteric collection is always what's happening internationally. The United Nations Human Rights Office harshly criticized Trump's pardons of the 4 Blackwater war criminals. Yes, it's an international incident already. Not unexpected.